Hello, it's Tracy Eyre. I'm going to read you a little excerpt from Wings and Justice, which is a novella I wrote a while back. It's sadly enough based on, or its villain is based on a true story that I heard was while watching television. Mara herself is a fangirl, and you'll learn a little bit more about the childhood she had to give up and the foe she has to defeat. So let's just begin. This is chapter 1, Beginning the Journey. The paper was blue under the moonlight on her desk. She'd been sitting there since sunset and kept silent vigil on the streets outside her house, the lanes between the small apartment complex and three-story homes across the way from her. At the window, she kept the printed chair in front of her and never opened it. It would obscure her form and help conceal her presence while she waited. Now that it was fully dark, the street lights were streaked with bats hunting moths, and a crescent of moon hung overhead. It had been still and quiet for hours in this parkside huddle of houses, though. Earlier, dog walkers had hurried by. Now not a soul would set foot outside, supposing their dogs tinkled on the kitchen floor. The neighborhood had been transformed like this 4 years ago. It had been full of sweet energy before that, waving neighbors and lemonade stands, running through sprinklers and garage sales, trick-or-treating. She'd been a 10-year-old kid back then. She felt worse for her little sister who'd been 7 when life had changed. This dark cloud had settled in and consumed the sun. And she couldn't pity herself. Every child here was like her, with a stolen childhood. Mara had proof of it. She had proof it took no prisoners right in front of her. She gazed back at the paper on her desk, its contents not exactly lyrical, but at 14 and change, she wasn't bad at putting things into writing. It read, "Hello, Khonshu, moon god. It's me. I want to start with how much I appreciate you for sticking around for years now. I'll never forget that. Walking to school, taking out the trash, being in my yard. I can imagine you were there, ready to pounce on evildoers. No matter how hard I try to change it, I still wish you would come into my neighborhood and fix the mess we're all in. But you just exist in comic books and on TV, in movies, and myth. Still, there's a man who lives just a few blocks away from here. He's dangerous. Very dangerous, I think. But there's nothing anyone can do about him. We've tried. My parents, one of my teachers. The police take him away, and a few days later he's back again. He chases the girls sometimes, so we've learned to stick together, look, and listen. Maybe that's a silver lining. He hides in the park and runs after us. He says and does horrible things. He's disgusting. I used to think that if you were here and you got him, Khonshu, he wouldn't be back around again. You'd take him far away from here and throw him in a volcano, feed him to a tiger, or drown him in the sea. I always believed that. And that's what I told my sister. But I'm 14 years old now. I'm old enough to know that heroes and gods don't save young girls. No one does. I'm folding this up and putting it away now, and you have to go with it. I'm so sorry, but I have to learn to fight by myself. I miss you. Thank you, Traveler of the Night. Mara. She stared up and out at the blur of crescent moon and willed it all to go away. She didn't want to do any of this. But if she didn't, she'd always look to daydreams to protect some part of her after the fact. Her mouth tasted of the bitter fruit that her childhood was over and had been for years. She found the strength to do this because it was time to protect someone else's. Mara had written this note for a few days now, but tonight she folded it carefully and pressed seams with her fingers, every little crease a fresh line in her heart as she made it smaller and smaller, and eventually hid it in the crack between the window jamb and the wall. She wiped her face and her eyes and watched the moon coast through the clouds, and though she tried not to think it, she whispered the chant she'd learned long ago by heart from the comic book pages and movie screens. Hail to Khonsu, light of the night, guardian of travelers and souls abroad. I am loyal to you, for you protect me where I go. Hail, hail. She lifted a hand almost as if to wave him goodbye. She leaned back in the blue moonlight, bundled in her blankets, her head pillowed on her chair's rest. Tomorrow would be a new day. She no longer knew what to expect of herself, but she had to get through the agony of tonight first. Mara set her phone on its stand and tapped the camera alive. By 1 a.m., she was asleep there, and by 3 a.m., she woke with a jolt. She'd heard something smash. Instinctively, she gathered up her phone. It was wirelessly connected to a camera beside her front door. She could see him, with a bottle of beer in one hand, staggering around. He was about 26? She wasn't sure. He'd thrown the other bottle against a smart little mailbox at her next door neighbor's place. He tucked a hand inside and stole the mail while she watched him. Finally, he meandered around and tried car doors along the street, but no one was that trusting anymore. She felt a sharp sneer form that she forced down. That was unbecoming for a girl, wasn't it? Finally, he wandered back toward the mailboxes, and she leaned forward in her seat. She held her breath and told herself not to be afraid. The house was locked and barred, and they had steel doors now. But her heart sped up. She made fists on the desk and told herself not to turn away, not to hide. Knowledge is power. She shook Thoth's words out of her head, even though she knew the scene they came from by heart. Thoth is no enemy to the Lord of the Night. She shook herself. Was the guy searching the porch for packages to steal? What? Her heart stopped. She swore when he bent down and stared into the camera, boozy, leering, and not able to reach her. But he didn't expose himself as he often liked to do when in person. He pointed at himself and then the camera like he knew she was watching, and he smiled. This was normally where she would have thought something like, "He will burn in fires," or "A God guides me." Now she just stared him in the eyes and willed herself to hold still and not be afraid. Her lips moved to the words, "If you come near my little sister, I swear I will get you." But no words came out. So the stage is really set there. You really get an idea of what Mara is up against and what she is giving up in exchange for telling herself to be brave and being adult, or what to her mind is adult. She's given up her faith in the things that most comfort her, her TV shows. It's like if you like Marvel heroic movies, like she's giving up that kind of comfort in exchange for what she sees as adulthood. So though while she's folded this part of her life up and is putting it away, I'm not sure it's given up on her.